Yeah, so a lot of people think acquisition and PR is growth. And I would say, no, like it is frequency of use and customers that create word of mouth. Sometimes too much acquisition or too much PR at the start actually can kill your product. And it can kill a very promising product because it is not being stacked the right way.
Hey techies, today we have for you a special guest, Nesh Sooriyan. Nesh has been a good friend of ours for many years, and it's an honor to have him with us today. Nesh is an entrepreneur in residence with Accelerating Asia, an independent startup accelerator that customizes programs for startups and partners. He previously founded Swiss-based fintech Bamboo Core AG, providing real-time proof of solvency for commodities trading, and a former product manager at Virtual Gaming Worlds. Nesh completed 2 prior trade sale exits in online food retail and last mile delivery in Australia and China.
Hey dudes.
Hey
Nesh.
Nesh.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, it's super awesome. I have enjoyed the personal journey of being in Singapore, as well as I think my pattern recognition around products and technology companies increased at a rate that it could not have in Australia or in Perth.
Oh, that's interesting.
Just because of seeing, like, to give you guys an example, in the last 6 months, we've probably seen 2,000 deals, scaled that back to 200 prospects, which we then scale back again to 10 direct investments. So over the course of that, and also because we're vertical agnostic, I see different products, different stages, different founding dynamics. Like, yeah, it's just patterns galore.
So tell us about Accelerating Asia.
Yeah, so Accelerating Asia, it was founded by Umra and Craig. They were previously from the Muridi program up here, and they'd been doing a lot of ecosystem work for a number of years. Craig founded a company that recently exited to Rakuten. Umra was previously working for the UN Women's Social Entrepreneurship Program.
Oh, wow.
So really deep networks in the region, had seen a bunch of startups, and then they said, hey, let's start an early stage VC fund here that's vertical agnostic and focused across the region. So Southeast Asia is obviously growing at a rate that is comparable to what we saw in China. Southeast Asia has its own challenges, but the population and the speed of growth is still significant. So the fund is focused on Southeast Asia, pre-Series A, and then we also help out corporates and some consulting. We do some consulting work with governments and universities as to, you know, what they're going to do for the future of work and the future of enterprise and engaging with startups, because at the end of the day, the work we do there benefits us in the fund and the way that capital is allocated.
So 2,000 prospects, you said?
Yeah, so every cohort so far, we've probably looked over about 2,000 touch points at the start, at the top of the funnel. And then, like, this cohort, we had, you know, about 300, 400, like, DD packs to go through, and then scale that back to the interviews and then the boot camps, and then, yeah, meeting founders face to face, which was difficult. So meeting founders face to face across Zoom.
What's your impression coming from Perth? Like, how would you compare it to sleepy old Perth?
Yeah. So these are all my opinions.
Of course.
They're not the opinions of Accelerating Asia or anyone else. But my opinion coming from Perth is, I think, like, so you see this in performing arts as well. Perth is very good because it shelters you from the big scary world a little bit. So you can develop your skills, you can test things here and there, but if you really want to grow, you need to access other markets. That's just what I would say to everyone. For me personally, the shift from Perth to here was also good because I think there is meanings and definitions that I give Perth. So this may not even be the culture scape of Perth itself, but it's meanings that I give from my upbringing around, what you are capable of, what you're not capable of, tall poppy syndrome, and all of those things that I was able to let go of in coming to Singapore, and even starting to travel with Bamboo, and even prior to that, when we started the food business in China, that I don't think I would have been able to do if I stayed Australia and Perth centric. And the reason I was able to let go of it was, I think when you move to Singapore or a place like Hong Kong, or even SF is that, and London's that, where there's a bunch of people that are from other nations that are coming somewhere to make it big, and there's a population size and a depth of capital market that supports that. The pace of growth, the pace at which deals move, the type of ideas that you see, you don't have a lot of time for your insecurities. Like, you just need to get over your insecurities, just keep moving. And it's also very easy to do that around people that are courageously curious, and have this like undeniable optimism about the world. Like, they're not seeing what's in front of them as a binary game of conflict. They're just seeing it as, these are a set of variables that I've been placed with. I need to empathize with the situation, find some compassion, and find a solution for what's in front of me. Whereas I think sometimes in pockets of our Australian culture, the conflict and like this binary sum game, it's too ingrained. Whereas I think the chaos of Southeast Asia, you have to get over that. Like, it's not win-lose. Like, you have to get over it, and you just have to keep getting deals done. You need to keep dancing with the scenario and figuring out the puzzle pieces.
Can you expand on that? Like, I guess it's pushing past the comfort zone of what you were used to in Perth, right? It's the
constant hustle.
Everything moves faster. No one's paying as much attention to you.
Yeah, like, to give you an example, in Perth, so Perth is good because, like, let's say you get a job at BHP, Rio, Bankwest, or whatever, and you get paid a significant salary, and you're on the hamster wheel. Like, you're getting paid, you've got disposable income, nothing's really that tough, and like, you don't necessarily have to prove yourself in this. And you take that, and then you try to create a startup ecosystem, and you're going to struggle because the expectations of the labor market are way too high for what's required, and you can't match capital markets to labor markets. And it takes a few courageous types to really get into a startup in an environment that is so flush with permanent positions. You really got to want to prove something, or you've really got to empathize with these people that you're building a solution for your startup, if you're going to go down that path. It's very different up here. Like, I think there is opportunities for like high income jobs, but they're still somewhat few. Like, it's still more, the greater opportunity here is to build something. Because if you build something in some of these markets, there's 100 million person populations that, will catapult your standard of living, your impact on the world, and any number of other things. And I don't think the Perth dynamic or the culture scape hasn't quite configured that yet. We see that in performing arts as well. So like, a band that starts off in Perth must move outside of Perth to make it for themselves. A comedian or a performer that starts off in Perth, like, you've got the likes of Tim Minchin, so there's Heath Ledger, Tim Minchin, and like a number of others. They had to leave Perth in order to make it big. But the fact that they were creative types and were somewhat innovative, that was spawned in Perth. I don't know how Perth can change. Like, even, I don't think there's going to be sufficient depth of capital that is attuned to early startup investing as well. And part of that is due to the lens at which the wealth was made in that state. So the wealth was made in that state around mining and property. And so both of those asset classes you have a finite upside, And so what happens is everybody's worried about dilution, they're worried about protective rights, and it's a very different style of investing compared to when we look at technology investing or disruptive solution investing. Because a lot of those, they have like 0 to no marginal unit costs and a significantly high upside. And the key part of that equation is that you can motivate people for the long haul, and you can motivate people to be very proficient at securing a user base and finding the business model and continuing to iterate. And it's a very different style compared to mining and compared to property. So
you did it with Bamboo. So
yeah.
do you want to tell us a little bit about your Bamboo story?
Yeah, my Bamboo story. Alrighty. So Bamboo, like, I think looking back at it now, I've had some time away. It's probably, there's a lot of lessons that I've learned. I've also learned a lot about myself from it. Bamboo started in Perth, but even the start of Bamboo was like me and Phil driving from San Francisco to LA after catching up with a bunch of crypto and blockchain mates and just talking the whole thing through. We stopped at their Bulletproof coffee shop in LA. We pulled our laptops out, and then we tried to recover all of these private keys that we had for all the various different types of wallets. We literally got 2 Bulletproof coffees and all the shots that they could muster, and then just sat there for like 6 hours trying to figure it out. And then Bamboo is the output of those struggles that we had. Bamboo is an interesting journey because we raised capital from Perth. The first check came in from Perth, but the investors that it came in from were early investors in Dash, and they were already in the crypto space. So they understood it. It was taking off. So you had zeitgeist fit. Perth very rarely gets zeitgeist fit. It's usually a laggard. But if you can find those early investors, then you can do well. The rest of the capital journey for Bamboo, we traveled to Switzerland, we traveled to Korea, Singapore. Singapore was actually the first sort of capital raising journey that we went on. And then those investors didn't come in, but then Perth investors did decide to come in. But it all helped us fine tune the product. The other thing was when Bamboo started, we automatically started looking at the US. We automatically started looking abroad because we knew that we had to. If you're going to go down the venture funding path, you need to be able to show a thesis that has sufficient upside and multiples. And one of the easiest ways to get significant multiples is to be a multi-market play from day one.
How did you, when you first decided to go on that journey? I mean, you look international. What was your first steps? Was there any hard lessons from those, first few months?
Yeah, so not so much for me, primarily because one thing that I say to a lot of founders is you don't need to know everything. And most technical founders will try to know everything. You just need to have people that you can call on that have been there and done it and have aligned incentives with you. Most of the car crashes we see in startups are predominantly due to a misalignment of incentives. That can be the way that the investors came in, what instrument they came in on, can be the way that employees are incentivized, any number of things. It can be also be, the contracts that you have with your suppliers. So what I would say there is I already had a network of people that were global. I knew the founders of Stream Token quite well, a guy by the name of Ben Yu. And so I reached out to him when we were initially looking at the US and said, hey, do you know a law firm that we could work with? And Ben Sand, who was the founder of Meta, which went through Y Combinator, called him up and also bounced the idea, said, do you know a law firm that we could use in the US? So from that, we got introductions to, it was Reed Smith at the time, and also one of the partners at Cooey Perkins who worked with Coinbase. So we were able to navigate on the basis of the social capital that we had with other founders. Similarly, when it came to Switzerland, my co-founders, they went, who's already worked on projects similar to ours, and so landed on KPMG Switzerland. The way that we found a bank was like nobody was banking us at one point when we had all that Ethereum as well. So we needed to liquidate in order to make our bills. Similarly, landed in Lithuania, talked to a bunch of other startup founders, said, how are you guys getting banked? Found this payment processor called Mr. Tango, figured out who Mr. Tango's bank was, and then we kind of navigated through to a bank that would actually bank us. So like similar to the approach that we take to solving problems in software, like you also need to take that a very similar approach to solving real world problems. So like there's no Git that you can access, right? When it comes to who banked who. So you actually just need to fall back on the biological system and go, hey, can I call somebody and figure out where they went?
It's just networking essentially. Yeah. How did you already have a connection with these people? Was that from going to the blockchain conferences and like hardcore networking, or had you worked with them in the past?
So little unknown fact, I used to be like a hardcore libertarian, believing in free market economics, the Austrian school and all those sorts of things. And so a couple of years ago, I went to this libertarian sort of camp that was run by some American entrepreneurs in Lithuania. And it's called the Sovereign Academy. There I met some of the most inspirational but just pragmatic founders from across the world. So every year they pick 50 entrepreneurs to go to this camp. And for a week, it's literally everyone just bouncing ideas off each other, from product development all the way through to the gold standard, and just tearing down topics. And one of the guys I actually met there is a guy by the name of Brian, who's in Bitcoin Core, and then also Ben Yu, who was the founder of Stream Token, and he was a Teal Fellow. It was a pretty high value network that I went to over the years to kind of navigate different jurisdictions, and still to this day, I'd say offers me like the most value of any other networking event that I've gone to. Wow. I actually, the term networking, we often brush it off, but there is a very definite science to just building a tangible connection with somebody, where there is sufficient trust that value can freely flow. Because I saw a very different type of networking in some ecosystems where people are always trying to take something. And so like the way that I network, like I don't even like to use the term network, is I like to know what you're looking for, and like what you want to achieve. And then as I'm meeting other people throughout my journeys, and something pops up, I'm like, oh, Alex, I actually met up with Alex 3 months ago, and he was interested in that space. Maybe I should connect you guys. And it's over like multiple years of doing that now I can then go back and call on those people, be like, hey, you're in this space, you're working on this little piece of legislation. Do you know who I would go to get advice on this?
Wow. So you essentially have a graph database in your head of everyone you know and what their desires and needs are.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I've actually been thinking about how do we scale that. I was talking to a NCAD lecturer here about how scalable our networks, and how do we get more out of like mentoring networks and more out of startup networks, because I think it is like we've done a lot to automate human processes, but one thing that we as humans do better than machines to this day is high fidelity contact. High fidelity to the point that trust dissipates, and we can just freely flow and express ourselves and connect, have breakthroughs and epiphanies as human beings.
Well, since we're talking about high fidelity contact, we're meeting right now over Zoom as opposed to in person. And, even though other than the physical distance, there's always been the whole pandemic problem that's pushing people apart. Has that affected how you interact with, your network in any way?
Yeah. So for me, it was quite difficult because I think a lot of the value that, or like a lot of the communication I get from somebody is seeing them in person.
Yeah, I agree.
And particularly with a founder, like there's moments where somebody's struggling with something and you have to ask it a number of different ways before they're able to articulate it. They're able to consciously be aware of it. And we're able to work with it and bring it into the room, right? So the difficulty I would say is, how do we stay focused on one another? And so in this environment, I think it's difficult to know when somebody is there, know when somebody is absent, and know when someone's hurting or know when someone's like happy and all those things. So one of the technologies that I have seen worked really well, I think it's called Our Conference.
Okay.
And what it does is it allows us, so it gives you like the panoramic view as if we were all sitting in a room, but then also allows us to focus on the person that's speaking at any given time. So we had a number of, like in our household, we had a number of Zoom barbecues or Zoom drinks every couple of days when we were in lockdown.
Yeah,
and the biggest difficulty was, like, if I was talking if there was a group of 5 of us, how could you have that, where 2 people split off and they have that really deep discussion? How could you have that in a Zoom call? Because like only 1 or 2 people could speak at one time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing I think we're missing.
So I'm just going to jump in. It's really funny you brought that up because we're actually developing a solution to that problem.
Yeah.
So we're developing a virtual world with spatial audio, spatial video. So you can sit at a table like you would in real life and kind of, monitor that conversation, but have this conversation over here and do that whole social jumping between things. Yeah. It's so important. And Zoom forces this, where only I can speak right now. And if you try, it'll just get blurred.
Yeah.
The real socializing is about that proximity, bouncing between things. So yeah, we're actually, that's our next venture, is solving that problem.
So yeah, like that's when I think about founding again, that's the thing I get super excited about. It's like we misaligned the incentives when it came to like social media. We misaligned some of the incentives or the UX UI challenges of connecting human beings across the internet. How do we restructure those incentives and actually create more high fidelity interactions? Because I was actually debating this the other day. If you look at Facebook, you look at Instagram, what we're seeing is those are billion-dollar trains that are out of the station. It's very hard to change those business models. And even just the word social media, right? Social is so connected to media, and then which is then connected to click-based traffic, which is then connected to their revenue stream. If they were to go and change that to a subscription model, they would have to do a hell of a lot of work. Plus, the quality of the content that we're churning out is terrible to the point that it is killing journalism as we know it, which is a completely different debate, right? It is ripe for somebody to come in, find a new way for human beings to meaningfully connect, meaningfully extract value, but also in doing so, meaningfully pay for the way that they interact. And this is something, John, you're super excited about as well. Like micropayments, I think plays a critical role in that. And we've not seen that come to fruition either. And like when we talk about zeitgeist fit, Facebook isn't everyone's favorite kettle of fish right now. Yeah, so like the utility, I think also like you do get some level of utility from it, but is the behavior that it is solidifying, or the habits that we're forming, are they beneficial for our happiness as a species? Are they beneficial for our progress, or are they now to our detriment?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm sure you've read them. They've done those studies where they actually purposely messed with people's moods. Like, I'm going to make you feel sad. I'm going to make you feel this way. And of course, anyone who's read a marketing book knows that feeling sad or afraid or angry sells products. So they've actually built a system which they can actively flood you with things that make you feel a certain way, and then sell you the solution, which no other media has ever really been able to do until now. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah. So like that's the beauty of like, I think, disrupting them, because like they need to get clicks, they need to get you to feel a certain way. Then they sit there as the middleman, and then they sell you somebody else's product. Like they're so dependent on that last step in that cycle that it is primed for somebody to come in and disintermediate this, deliver utility and a value exchange between the user and the company itself, as opposed to being the middleman. Like we're talking about the disintermediation of markets. Facebook needs to be disintermediated.
I agree completely. I would love to be the one to do it. True, as well.
Well, mate, if it was one of those prizes, right, that Peter Diamandis puts up, like, you know, the $1 million prizes, this is like the multi-billion-dollar prize. Because it talks to like what Clayton Christensen says about disruption, right? Like the young upstarts have more mobility to shift this, and the likes of Facebook can't move quickly enough to overcome you. And there's enough of a set of investors around the world who are now more publicly speaking about it, saying that they would like to back the disruptor of Facebook.
So out of the 200 startups you've brought into the fold, any social media challenges there?
Not yet. I think we're good. Like I have been bubbling away at it.
Yeah. I got a feel it will start in Asia. Like I don't think Facebook's reach is as powerful there. So that's got to be where it's ripe for disruption.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So accelerating Asia, I can't speak on behalf of
course,
accelerating Asia, but like we're vertical agnostic. The startups that we see are like, man, like I was with Plus Eight. Plus Eight does amazing things in Australia, but they're like, as a human being, part of the corporate machine. Well, it's not really a corporate machine, but part of an organization. I love the work I do because of the diversity of companies that I see. Like in Bangladesh, founders that are tackling the agricultural supply chain. In India or Indonesia, seeing a fintech startup that is just overcoming like a financial system that has so much friction and has like a huge population that's just waiting to take advantage of it. Like it's just so engaging to see, because these are companies that are working with the pipes of our society, right? Like the pipes that flow money back and forth, they flow utility, they flow standard of living back and forth. And these are companies that will make a meaningful difference here. Like we will see people go from middle class to upper middle class to like boosting standard of living, like massively, as a result of the work these companies do. And we're seeing them at like pre-Series A stage. Like they've hustled their way to getting revenue. Whereas like I found when we're looking at startups in Australia, sometimes people were waiting for investor validation before they would go out and build a saleable product. Whereas here, in some of these markets, there's not the depth of capital. So these founders, they hustle really hard to get to like $10,000 monthly recurring revenue, $40,000 monthly recurring revenue. And then they come to Singapore or they go to Hong Kong, and they're this monster startup that's just super humble and downselling themselves.
I think that's fairly common with startups anywhere, from my experience, though. Well, except maybe Silicon Valley. I think startups in Silicon Valley are a bit more quick to have massive offices and kind of think of themselves as the new Zuckerbergs.
Which is why it's so interesting that you're in Southeast Asia. There's a big startup community growing across Southeast Asia. I've been to Indonesia a few times. And in Jakarta, they have a huge base there, and a really cool culture, especially since the rise of Gojek and Gojek engineering. And Grab in Malaysia has also grown very quickly. So I'm curious about what really triggered your move to Singapore in the first place.
Yeah, if you ask my mum, she says you always wanted to be in Singapore. I think that was talking back to my view on tax. Like, but that was when I was more libertarian, I guess. So when Umar and Craig first talked to me about accelerating Asia, I was out of Bamboo, and I think I was at VGW for a bit, and then was working in consulting. And so those are two meaningful sort of shifts for me. It was seeing what real money gaming is about and the culture there, and then also seeing where the culture of management consulting was at as well. Umar and Craig talked to me, and I was like, but when Craig first called me, I was sitting in a lounge, in a Qantas lounge in Brisbane. Anyway, sitting in a Qantas lounge, and he calls me, and I was like, hey man, I've just started this gig in management consulting. I don't think I can move. I take a hike on the weekend, and I just go, they're doing actual social impact, and they're doing it like at the coal face. Like these are huge markets that are awakening. And if I don't take this opportunity, then there's going to be something wrong. So hopped on a plane that week and came up for one of their first selection processes and got to meet the founders. That's like the first step. And I was just, when you have that solid jam session on product and you just walk away and you are buzzing, like your brain is just making all these connections. That's what happened when I first came up here. And it was like the test of, who do you want to be around? Like, do you want to be around those people? And that it ticked that box, because I was just like, they're good human beings and they're making a difference. And at that point I was like, I couldn't even be bothered what the earning potential is. I'm gonna make the move. You don't say that to people, right? Then I think another thing was when I was walking through the streets of Singapore, there's something about, I think, the origins of where I come from that like resonated. So the smell of the streets, the food, seeing people that look like you, that really resonated with me. So like there was the impact that we could have, and then also feeling at home that I don't think was necessarily there in some of the places where I had to grow up in Western Australia. That was huge. And then overcoming this idea that the rest of the world is a backwards place. It's not. So I would have this debate often at Bamboo, like the rest of the world isn't backwards or behind just because there's a certain type of standard of living in Australia. Like the rest of the world is frantically moving forward, and like your home is literally the square footage around you and what you can do with it.
They're just ripe for opportunity, not worse, not in a worse state. They're just ripe for opportunity. That's how I would see it. Yeah.
The focus seems to be on Southeast Asia, but what about the rest of Asia? Japan, Korea, Taiwan. Does Accelerating Asia look at those countries as well?
Yeah, so can't speak to the fund, but we do get applicants from all across the rest of Asia as well. So from Korea,
very cool.
From Japan, from China. We have a pretty decent relationship with a couple of the accelerators and venture funds up in China, and also South Asia. So Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India. So the blockchain company that we're potentially looking at from India. Yeah.
When you came to Singapore, did you find that, because I know that you did a lot of work on LinkedIn to connect with people and stuff, as you moved to a different country with different cultures, was there a different platform for this kind of connection with people?
Yeah, so Indo, as you're aware, WhatsApp, Myanmar, WhatsApp, but the initial connection is always like face-to-face and then transition to that. Like you'd send somebody an email here and it'd take a while for them to respond, whereas a WhatsApp message is like you'd get a response straight away.
What about in COVID times when you can't make that face-to-face? What's the transition been? Yeah,
so then you rely on one step removed social capital. So it's like if somebody knows you, then they connect you. Or let's say we're both speakers at an event, we'll then connect. Or there's the members clubs as well. So when I moved up here, I joined one of the members clubs here, which was quite good. And that became a way to also network. I think let your like courageous curiosity guide you, right? So so by courageous curiosity, I mean, like, don't be afraid to question, but the way that you question needs to be respectful and seeking knowledge through shared wisdom, as opposed to that, that binary approach that we sometimes see, or conflict approach. And if you approach all interactions with that, then the world just opens up, is what I probably realized here. And I don't think I had that epiphany during Bamboo, but I had that epiphany from being here. And like I said, it was like seeing the pace at which things need to move. It was like, start running and letting go of some of those previous personality traits that you held on to, or just go back to Perth. And I was like, yeah, if I'm sitting on my deathbed at the end of my life, I want to have said, yeah, I put it all on the, not put it all on the line, but was capable
you got
of
outside
letting
your
go,
comfort zone. Yeah.
Capable of letting go of some of the identity traits. Yeah.
Do you miss being on the other side of the discussions?
I think
like the chase rather than the. I mean, it's nice being being someone's benefactor, but do you miss being the hunter?
Yeah, that's it. That's an interesting way to put it. I think I get the best of both worlds, and the way that Accelerating Asia is, I get the best of both worlds. So, because the EIR role, I get to sit there with founders and get nitty gritty with the product and growth, and I love that. And then I also get to be on the founder's side, and then also on the other side, kind of saying, hey, how do we bring people together? I think it just comes back to a mind shift there. I don't think there is two sides of the table. I think there's just there is a bunch of individuals in a room all needing something. That the fact that we only think there is two sides is us thinking that the corporation on both sides of that is an actual entity, right? And the corporation is a construct that is an expression of the individuals. And so when you start to break down a room as individuals, you start to be able to navigate it a lot better. Because even within the board of a startup, like most of the startups we deal with, they don't have developed boards yet. So like even within the founding group of the startup, there's human beings trying to navigate, what love means to them, what progress means to them, what happiness means to them. And then you're trying to then put that into contract or code in a way, right? Yeah. So how about you guys? How's relationship and startup balanced for you, right?
Well, from a personal perspective, I think as a business, we have, over the last year, we're on that journey to remove ourselves from the operations and bring in people to take care of that for us and move to a more strategic level, which in theory improves your work-life balance, right? I don't know how true that is. And I would say I love working in Ninja Software. It's an amazing business. And I don't want to speak for John, but I think he's in the same boat. We dedicate ourselves to this for the passion of it. So jump right back to Accelerating Asia and all the startups you're working with. What's your hot take, quick clip, most common advice you give?
Acquisition is not growth.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Most investors only care about acquisition.
Yeah, I think so a lot of people think acquisition and PR is growth. And I would say, no, like it is frequency of use and customers that create word of mouth. Sometimes too much acquisition or too much PR at the start actually can kill your product, and it can kill a very promising product because it has not been stacked the right way.
That's actually very true. So, but there has to be, especially for a lot of products that require quick scale, that's a pretty difficult balance to. There's a balance. There's a few products that we'll be launching very soon that, unfortunately, due to the nature of two-way marketplaces, essentially, they need momentum straight away. Yeah. And
so two-sided marketplaces are notorious for this, right? Because two-sided marketplaces, you need some level of critical mass. So when I talk to let's say consumer app like Superhuman, that's one where they have scaled very slowly. They've done very well. they've found the right demographic that's willing to pay them for their use of the early beta and then the product. Two-sided marketplace. I don't know how many two-sided marketplaces we're going to see get up and running in the next couple of years that aren't able to bootstrap their growth, just because the purse strings have tightened. The venture funding that was previously accessible to those startups can get better bang for buck investing in companies that have already hit that inflection point, right? So that's what I would say to that. Yes, it's a balance. It's a balance with the expectations that the founder and product team have for what capital they have accessible to them before they need to go for that next round of funding. And so you're always trying to, like, thread the needle. You're trying to thread the needle of, my product needs to get to here. I need to get these indicators of success, and then I can go to investors, and then they will say that we're now not a $2 million company, but we're a $4 million company. And so that is the balance. And what I would say in COVID and where the market shifts is those indicators of what makes you a $4 million company have changed. And so that's where, you know, the CEO and the product team probably need to come together and go, okay, what does that next milestone now look like if we're going to run out of capital?
What would you say those indicators are?
Yeah, so frequency of use is still good. I think that's why you have seen across this region a bunch of people scaled back their teams, because they were previously, this is what we would have got us to the next round, but now we can't do that. So we need to scale back our team, and we need to take a more conservative approach to the next milestone. The gold standard is going to be revenue and profit margin. But I think with the right executive team relationship building and previous success with investors in this region, you could do well maybe just like scaling back your team, forming good relationships with VCs, and hitting your growth targets. So like having really good D30 usage, D15 usage, and not churning much of your user base, and having a clear path to profitability, but then also becoming a multi-market play in a big, or being in a big enough market. So companies that will struggle is, you know, a company that's, you know, in a small market, can't really be multi-market, and needs to spend a lot of money to get this small market.
Like a two-way marketplace. Yeah, that's pretty much due to COVID, a lot of these projects got paused anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you must have seen quite a few of the startups you're working with kind of pause and go.
Fizzle out. Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually, surprisingly, we saw some pause, but like, so we went 14-day sprint, right? 7 days there was a pause or there was a drop back. And then within 14 days, what we saw was companies partnered, or they adjusted their strategy and started to get their first growth tests out for what was the new normal. And then we saw some companies actually 3x their engagement within the next 14-day sprint.
Wow.
And we saw them develop partnerships with other startups in the portfolio or other startups in their cohort, which led them to actually find verticals that they could tackle while COVID was on. So we had a couple of examples in Bangladesh where an e-commerce site partnered with a farm-to-plate company, and then a fintech as well.
Wow.
And then in the ed tech companies, we saw them, you know, they were getting significant multiples on their engagement just because of the way that people are now interacting with the education providers.
Absolutely. EdTech is now this. Everyone is now interested in EdTech, and you know, people are doing classes over Zoom and actually creating proper digital content. Your EdTech startups must be pretty happy. Yeah. I wouldn't say COVID's something to be happy about, but there's definitely sectors that are doing well. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you have that courageous curiosity and you're epiphany seeking in your company culture, COVID offers you an opportunity to, you know, find epiphanies that may not exist in a couple of months' time, right?
Yeah.
So like there's heaps of, you know, dopamine that we can kind of access from, you know, doing purposeful work. With the ed tech startups, I think we saw some really cool companies in the AI space do very well here. The edtech is always a path. It's a constant journey to try and find your business model. Just because it's notoriously hard to get paid by institutions.
Yeah.
And students are usually poor.
It's a slow moving industry most of the time.
Yeah. And so like I met a couple of edtech founders in this, in the last couple of months, and all of them, the trait that they have in common is that they know all of the go-to-market strategies in edtech that have been played by other startups, and they're trying to find their little angle on it. So met a really cool founder who did a Master's of Education at Harvard, and then she was tackling edtech in Pakistan. And we spent like, I think 30 minutes just jamming on different business models for edtech plays. And then I reached out to a couple of other VCs and said, hey, you need to meet with this founder, because like the knowledge you can gather from meeting with a founder in those moments are like incredible. Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So this is, I think, something that I've really hit on here, because there's such a diversity of different, paths to get here that people have gone on. So if I catch up with a founder who's just looked at all the go-to-market strategies in edtech, and for 30 minutes, they just detail every one to me, and we kind of try to battle test each of them. I've now gathered all of the epiphanies that it may have taken that founder like years to get to within 30 minutes. Which then we're both better for it, because she's then also battle tested those, and she's now onto the phase, X of her epiphanies. Then I take that and I work with another founder, let's say in another industry vertical, and I've got those business models that she's shared with me in edtech, but I can pattern recognize that they might work for an agricultural startup, or a startup that's working on air quality in buildings with an IoT device. And then I share those with that next founder, and that next founder now has the multiples of my pattern recognition, as well as the years of research that founder's done, and her pattern recognition. And this is something we're releasing an article on shortly, which is the cohort effect, like how you access those learnings. And that's like super. Like, I feel as though if you see enough deals and you talk to enough of those founders, that is stuff that will never be taught in a university.
Yeah. Can you expand on what you mean by pattern recognition in this context?
Yeah, cool. So let's say I see an edtech company that's utilizing AI to deliver adaptive syllabus, because we all know syllabus, is reformed in these slow intervals with teachers looking at it. And they try to monetize by selling to institutions, like educational institutions initially, and it doesn't work. But then I look over at gaming and I go, hey, the free-to-play model seems to work, and then a percentage pay for the rest, right? What if you just went out and you acquired with your education application that looks kind of like a game, you acquired a bunch of users, and then you came back and you sold to those institutions or those tuition clinics as almost the funnel for them to get those students. That's us putting together patterns that we see across different industries. And so I think it's called Building 21 or Building 91 at MIT. This was like one of these, I think it was the post-World War II era. And there was a bunch of different academics from different fields, and they were all in this building that was like poorly constructed, and they were just bouncing into each other, and they were talking about their different fields of thought. And what ended up happening was there was a huge amount of breakthroughs into that building. And then there was a huge amount of like Nobel, I think it was Nobel Prize nominees or laureates. And it's a direct result of human beings. We see patterns. Like from the moment we're born, what we're doing is we're mimicking, we're seeing patterns, and we're doing that again and again. When you sit in a cubicle at a cube farm, you're only seeing a subset of patterns. And one of the best ways for you to impact the world is for you to take the patterns that you see and mix and match them with other patterns that you see in multiple fields. What the friction that we usually see to that is when we think we know everything, we lack compassion, curiosity, or there is so much fear that we then rely on us having to know everything to be the counter to the fear that we face. So I witnessed this in mining in particular, where engineers, they have to be right sometimes. And in mining, that is the case because mining goes through these commodity cycles. And so if you're not right and you're not the smartest, then you're the guy that walks out the door when iron ore price hits $21. And what that's doing is that's just killing the culture of epiphany seeking and holding society back from actually, pattern recognizing across fields and being confident enough to go, hey, maybe this pattern applies over here.
That's really cool. I like that. I feel like you could write a book on that.
It's interesting. On the topic of pattern recognition, where you pick up knowledge and you apply it to different areas in a different form. When you mentioned a while back that because of COVID-19, startups have had to connect with other startups, kind of work together as a cohort. What does it look like in terms of those startups being able to navigate the sea of other startups in the area, finding one that really suits that complements what they're trying to do? Do they come to you and you connect them with others, or do they have a place where they congregate and network with each other?
Yeah, so I actually learned this from Space Cube, and then I saw it up here. So with Paleo Meals Direct, I didn't connect with any other startup founders during that whole startup journey. Like, we were just heads down, focused on one company. And then after that, I walked into Space Cube and started connecting with other founders. And we just talk about digital marketing for e-commerce around the lunch table there. And it was like so rewarding. And like, I was going, this is awesome. And we were like all learning from each other. Then when I came up here, and if we're talking about COVID, what we saw was the startups in the cohort or within the portfolio, they all knew each other already. So number one, they have trust. They have a shared value set as founders. They know and that's also filtered by the investment thesis and the way that our organization works. And so you've got these founders that know each other, they trust each other, they have a shared value set, and then they face pressure, but they're able to navigate how to make a deal and work together to continue to deliver utility. So you get that in a cohort from an accelerator. In a VC fund, I think the connectors have always been the general partners, the entrepreneurs in residence that are seeing those companies and then going, hey, I think you're in trouble here, or this looks like a hurdle that you need to overcome. Let's connect you over here because they've already overcome it. Yeah, I think we've got a couple of different functions in our world that do that. I haven't seen that done well I haven't seen that digitized very well yet. And I feel as though that's still the role of human beings. But I think at some point in our future, we might see that digitized. And I think if we see the first like fully digital VCs where you literally just plug into an API and you unlock funding on the basis of, hitting milestones, we might see that happening.
We spoke about EdTech, but we didn't actually cover the question you sent us, which is, why are you passionate about EdTech?
Yeah, why I'm passionate about EdTech is I think it's pattern recognition, and the things that hold us back, I think, start at a very young age. Like human beings, where I think we come like with a hot loaded syntax to some regard as babies, but then how we structure the human being from that point onwards, there's a lot of factors that come into play. And I don't think our society completely comprehends how important that is for the future. So like EdTech as a revolution at the moment, we're tackling the back end of this problem. We're dealing with repurposing people. but I think EdTech needs to maybe go earlier, very carefully, because obviously, you don't want to stuff up the next generation, but we need to go earlier and see how can we alleviate some of the pressures that we have on early childhood. How can we do early childhood better as well? Because we're no longer getting kids ready for factories. And one thing that I'm very passionate about is I don't think sending kids to a school 9 to 5 like they're factory workers just because it coincides with the working hours of parents is the most beneficial thing we can do for raw human consciousness, finding, navigating, and creating pattern recognition around the world, about the world. I think one of the saddest things about early childhood education is that we lock kids up in a school for such a long period of time. We've taken away the cultural connection. We've taken away them playing in the wilds. We've taken away, them falling over and grazing their knee. And I think a lot of that needs to come back. And I think if we look at them as these pattern recognition machines that are going to change the world, and we treat them like that, treat children like that, and give them exposure to new technologies and things a lot earlier, we'll be pleasantly surprised around the world that we create.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's hard to see the solution though on a societal level. Yeah,
so the ones that are the schools that I'm kind of excited by is probably the Green School in Bali, and then also the Acton Academy in the US. Those would be the ones that I find to have a really cool approach, using the Socratic method really early, child-directed learning. And if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, the democratic schooling method is also quite interesting.
Democratic schooling method?
Yeah, it's where like the kids vote for their they vote for their teachers, they vote for what they'll learn.
Wow.
They act like little actors within our society from a very young age.
All right, well, I think we'll end on a bit of just a fun question. If you could have coffee with any deceased figure from history, who would it be?
Wow, that's a big one. I would actually like to have coffee with Salvador Dali.
Nice.
Yeah, because I firmly believe that there's part of that chaos that he makes meaning out of, that it'd be really cool to break down the way that he looked at the world and the important role of confusion in epiphanies.
That's brilliant.
Alrighty, guys, it was good to catch up.
Yeah, it was.
Let's do that beer at some point.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, thanks, Nesh.
See you then. And that's the end of this episode of Tech Society. Thanks for listening. Nesh shared so many tips and knowledge with us today, and we hope you found it useful and helpful in your own journey. Tweet us any questions or comments in today's episode at Tech Society. We'll read and respond to every single one. Next step, head to techsociety.fm and sign up to our weekly newsletter. We promise we'll use it for noteworthy information only, no spam. Today's episode was sponsored by Ninja Software, which you can check out over at njs.dev.